Welcome, everyone. You're here with Shannon and Paula, and we're with Sage Wellness Connection. And we're back with another 8 Dimensions of Wellness webinar. And today we're going to chat a little bit about emotional wellness. And this is a really important dimension for us, as Shannon and I have both worked in the area of human services for quite some time. We both began in the area of recreation and then moved on into this area after we furthered our education. And I think working in human services, and particularly for us, we both work with individuals that have developmental disabilities, cognitive delays, and some challenges, complex needs. And so we're talking about emotional health and wellness quite often. We've ran a caregiver support group for about 10 years or 9 years, Shannon. And so we support a lot of caregivers through emotions and talk about emotional health and how important this is. And today we're going to further that conversation and talk about how emotional wellness is just one aspect of the wellness wheel. And for us as well, there is the human services dealing with all these families, but we also went on to further our education and took a psychological health and safety certificate. And so then we also have a focus on workplace wellness and everything that goes into that as well. And so we have a lot of different areas that are important to us, and emotional wellness is a part of that.
Well, I think, Paula, you bring up such a great point about us kind of continuing down that path to look for additional kind of education, you might say, or support. Because when we are talking emotional wellness, we need to do things that do support that. And it really just supported the fact that wellness is not just about your emotions. There are all those other areas. Having worked through those support groups and supported those families and kiddos across that time really led us to see that because maybe they're struggling with the stress, the sometimes lack of information of how to handle a situation, it was impacting everything. It was impacting their physical well-being, their financial well-being, their work, like their occupational well-being, and sometimes even their social connections as well. And they needed something or sometimes someone to support them through that. So that really also spoke to that spiritual piece of where do you get that other level of support? So I think it's so important that when we put all of this together, that kind of led us down that path to think that, you know what, we need as much as we can to find other avenues for people to be able to manage their stress, manage or, strengthen their emotional wellness and well-being. I think that the yoga piece, for both of us, we have been very honest to say has been a great addition, not just in our own lives, but also bringing that messaging and that spiritual piece forward as an option for others. There's all kinds of avenues for sure. And we did talk about that in our spiritual wellness webinar. But I think that for us, having that background has just been able to bring a whole nother level for the people that we have supported across the time that we've been working.
Absolutely. And we'll get into this a little bit more as we talk about the wellness wheel. But before that, we'd like to acknowledge the Canadian Mental Health Association and the Royal Mental Health Project for sponsoring this workshop.
Yeah, we're so excited about being able to be involved with the Rural Mental Health Project because it is a Canadian mental health project initially, but it has that rural lens. And I think that's so important because as we've said across many of our webinars, obviously you can make some generalizations when we talk about a wellness wheel that impacts everybody. It doesn't matter where you live, whether it's in that very large urban center or that very remote area or just in that kind of average rural area. But the things that we need to look at are the things that look differently. And part of that is just time and space. We don't have all the same services that an urban center may have. And I don't mean necessarily the clinicians and things like that, but sometimes it's just purely about transportation. How do you get to these supports? How do you get to that fitness center? How do you get to the even grocery store to manage your own health and well-being in that nutritional sense. So we've got to look at it differently. And how do we make it accessible for everybody? You know, if anybody's listened to the news, they've heard about the cost of things. Well, the one thing I've learned when you live in rural areas is everything has to be shipped in. So it can, you know, in a time and space sense of thing, cost that time and space, but also cost more just to get here. So what we hope is across time, as we build our communities up, we can look more locally, find those services, supports. You know, it's a very big agricultural community, that maybe we do more farm to table stuff, that people understand that that's actually where the food comes from, is all those great farm families that we have surrounding us in the Wainwright area. And that's looking to those strength-based pieces when we look at this project. But we're looking from that, ultimately, that whole community view, that we have professionals that may be in as doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, things like that. They may live here as well, but we also have a broader community, and we have newcomers coming in all the time, which is very exciting, because that brings a whole new dimension to your community. But then we've got to make sure, if we want our newcomers to stay, there's a reason for it. And I think being in a town that has had military attached to it for so many years now, beyond my understanding and scope, I can't even honestly say how long they've been here, but it really does change the dimension of your community. So we've got to make sure that we're also, in some way, maybe even luring our military people, that when they retire, they want to stay here and there's a reason to stay. But we've got to do that in a collaborative way, and we've always said that, so we appreciate that about this project. We've worked with the impact committee, the people on that committee. We are highlighting many of those people because they provide great services within this community, and that might be your initial point of contact when you're looking for some resources. So please take the opportunity to look at all the other workshops that are webinars that we have been doing, so that you can see some of those people. And we've also highlighted them on podcasts, and that might be your first initial connection within the community to find the resources you want. But finally, I just want to say, and we've talked lots as we've brought all these different people on to our webinars and podcasts, about 5 in 5 people have mental health. So we need to understand this isn't a diagnosis. This isn't an illness. This is just, we all have mental health. So we need to support it, just like we wouldn't even second guess on supporting our physical health, or making sure that our job was giving us enough money, or that we have enough finances in the bank. Mental health is the same thing. What we know is when we start talking about all of those things, those are the things that impact our mental health, as we may want to put it, or like where we're focused on today, it may impact our emotional health and well-being too. So as we move forward, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper about that, but just always keep in mind that's the basis of this project and why we've had the opportunity to be able to send out this message to the community.
And I think I really liked, we had a guest, Ariel Hobrick, and she talked about mental health as a continuum. And that really helped me look at it in a different lens, because we're always working on our physical health. Sometimes we're at, maybe you were ill and you had to work back up to where you were physically at one point, and then you want to push yourself in another area. So you're going to maybe increase some exercise or work on your sleep, and then you're improving your physical wellness. But why could your mental health not be like that? Because it is. Sometimes we have challenges. Sometimes we go through periods of grief, and then we're in the phase where we're accessing support, we're working on improving our mental health. And then there's times where we are at a great place. And maybe for many of us, especially in Alberta, where the winters are long, the daylight is short, maybe in the winter, we're having those challenges around that. But in the summer, maybe things are going really well and we're at optimal mental well-being just because of that length of daylight and improvement in the weather. So it is, I really like looking at it as a continuum, because it shows that we have the ability to move back and forth on that line or that spectrum, and it's okay. I think that would, I think it's really important to know that it's okay that we're in different phases with our mental health.
And, if we look at an industry where you see lots about dieting, all of that on TV, anyone that's gone down that path knows this is not a straight line to success.
Mhm.
If you've made some fitness goals for yourself, it's a back and forth, it's an up and down. Because I think it's almost socially more acceptable to talk about that in some ways. But I like what you're saying, Paula, because when we talk about our emotional health, our mental health, it's also the same. When you talk about that continuing, it is up and down. Just like if you decided part of your fitness goal was you would be healthier if you were carrying less weight, or you could walk further because your cardio is way better. It's not by tomorrow it's going to be great. I joke all the time, even for myself, it feels like Groundhog Day more often than not, that every day I get up and I got to start again and I got to make sure my
Oh, yeah.
flexibility is there, my mobility is there. So that's kind of how I look at it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why we really stress the importance of taking a holistic approach to well being, taking a look at all areas of our lives and how they relate to each other. And that's why we really like the philosophy of using the 8 dimensions of wellness, because all areas in our life are interconnected and they're also interdependent on each other as well. And so when one area is out of sync, it can create an imbalance, which impacts the entire system. But I think the beauty of thinking in this holistic perspective is that if one area is out of sync, well, we can take another area, use those strengths from the other area to help things round out and help to balance out that wheel.
I think we've used the analogy about the orchestra. So I thought
Mhm.
I just have to add that little bit. If you've ever had the opportunity to see the commercial about the mom in her relatively nice vehicle, she gets to drive in and listen to the kids, that they're in an orchestra and they're all playing together. And because in our analogy, when we talk about that professional orchestra, we talk about when they're warming up, does not sound pretty. In fact, it's quite scary sounding. But then when they collectively put it all together, how harmonious it is.
Mhm.
But when we watch this other commercial and we watch these kids, what it reminds us, it takes years of work to get to
Mhm.
that harmony. It's not just automatic that you warm up a little and you're just going to be perfect at it. And now you've got this beautiful harmony. No, just like the kids, you got to work at it for years, or just like your son, Paula. He's had to work at it for years to be able to play at a level that you get to go from that really creaky, scary sounding warm up to these beautiful, incredible sounds, but it takes work.
Yeah, and I think that's where we've used the word practice a lot. We have to shift our thinking. Practice is not bad. Practice
No.
is just part of the journey. And it shouldn't be as painful and as monotonous and as difficult as sometimes, maybe not everyone. I'm just speaking for sometimes for myself, that practice. It feels like I'm never getting anywhere because all I ever do is practice. But why can't we be in the moment? We look at professionals, professional athletes, professional singers, professional musicians. They spend a lot of time on those fundamental principles
Yes.
of practice, right? They're singing scales, they're practicing pieces of music that are basic to maintain that level, and then they improve. Athletes are the same, right? They're doing certain training fundamentals to have a foundation that supports their improvement. And so I think, why wouldn't the common person have to practice?
And I heard another funny story about that the other day, that, there were some hockey players complaining a little bit about, why do we have to do the same, basically skills,
Drills or whatever.
drills, whatever you want to call them, over and over again. Well, it's because of that. Because like your
Hmm.
son, if he didn't practice those scales all the time, they wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be at the quality that they are now to be able to now move it on to the music. And so whether you're a hockey player or you're just a person just out there, not specifically working on an absolute specific skill, same thing. We've got to start with those fundamentals, practice them all of the time. And then it's usually when we look back and we remember that, oh, right, before, maybe when I think of yoga, right, maybe I couldn't even sit cross-legged with my knees to the ground, but I forgot because I got there and I was always still looking ahead. So
Hmm.
sometimes we do just need to appreciate and look back and say, oh, and congratulate ourselves. Right, from my practice, I can do this now. I may be looking ahead, but it's okay to every once in a while just sit in where you're at and appreciate where you've got to.
Exactly. And I think that is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the harmonious balance to our wellness. And so the one thing that we do use is the wellness wheel, like I mentioned before, and it is a tool for self exploration. And it can help us take a look at our life and how certain areas impacts our overall health and well-being.
And I think it's important that when we say this and we say, let's take a look at it, we don't just look at the wheel and say, I think I'm
Hmm.
feeling like a 2 today in finances, or I am feeling really good about myself and emotionally I'm feeling strong, so I'm a 10. No, we actually have an assessment that you
Hmm.
can gives you kind of that concrete look at each one of those areas and be able to make probably a little bit more objective look at it and evaluation of it. And we've often said that people are surprised. They think, like exactly what I just said, that, hey, they're feeling emotionally strong today. So I'm going to rate myself as a 10. But when they start unpacking some of the things that in those questions, they realize, maybe I wasn't taking care of a few things emotionally that I thought I was. And that's what's leading to, maybe the trouble with the finances. Maybe I am going online and actually buying all those things that I always talk about being in my cart because I'm not feeling emotionally secure or I need some feedback that feels positive. It's like all of a sudden deciding to eat the cake that you wouldn't normally, and maybe you don't even really like cake, but all of a sudden you just needed to feel a little rebellious and do something that just in the moment might feel really good. It's kind of the same thing. We're just saying, you need to answer those questions in a more objective way in order to get a really good assessment and picture.
So if you'd like our wellness self-assessment, email us or connect through us through social media or our website, Sage Wellness Connection, and we can send that out to you. Or take time to watch some pieces of our past webcasts or podcasts because we explain each dimension in depth a little bit more. Because sometimes if you're just thinking environmental, you're only looking at it from your own perspective. And we try to take into account a variety of perspectives in each dimension. And so it gives you a clearer picture of what each section involves, and then you can accurately rate yourself on this scale. And so this slide,
Sorry, I
sorry,
was just going
Jasmine.
to say, and I think the one great piece of being able to have other people being a part of our podcast and things like that,
Mm,
it has given a different view. Even, for ourselves, I always
yeah.
feel when I talk to somebody else, I've learned something more, and it just brings in a different perception of it so we don't get just stuck in our own.
Yeah, because I think we do so often. Because I know as we've been on this path, Shannon, we're looking out of a certain lens and we're working in conjunction with the Rural Mental Health Project and then our own views as well. And so we do head down this one path. And it is the beauty of this project that we're able to bring people in. I think it's been wonderful. And so, yeah, take a look and take a listen at our past webcasts and podcasts. And so this slide here is after someone has taken the self-assessment. And so certain areas they may have scored lower, and those are the areas where maybe they're having some current challenges. And then there's other areas that have scored higher. And so use the areas that are higher to help support the areas that where there are challenges.
I think I had some really good examples when we've had the chance to talk to different people about using those strengths.
Hmm.
We're telling a story of, a family that, it was a really challenging time. Their son was hurt. They had to, for them, what worked best, of course, this was an emotional thing. This was like, impacting all of the areas. They couldn't go to work, but they did have a very strong social connection and a very strong spiritual connection. And they were able to reach out to those two avenues to support them through this extremely challenging time. And as I watched this story progress across the last few months, what a difference and how well the family's doing. Of course, it's still challenging. Of course, it was like changed everything about the world and probably what they knew about it. But to have those two bases that they worked hard in building really made the difference for them to be able to stand there today, be supportive of their son, and keep marching down that path. So that's kind of what we're saying about sometimes you need to lean on the areas because there's other things that are sometimes completely out of your control.
Absolutely. That's a great example. And so moving on to what our philosophy is around emotional wellness, it relates to your understanding of feelings and your ability to cope effectively with life stressors and challenges. And it's important to pay attention to self-care, self-kindness, relaxation, stress reduction, and the development of inner resources so you can learn and grow from experiences.
And I think we like to make that distinction between the self-care and self-kindness. And even
Yes.
talking to Ariel the other day, she was making a distinction even in the self-care itself, that we're not
Hmm.
just talking about baths and things like that. We're talking beyond that self-care and taking care of that emotional wellness, taking care of that physical wellness and well-being, all of those different aspects. And then when we talk self-kindness, we mean it's a little bit about forgiveness at times.
Hmm.
It's okay. We're going to make some errors. We're going to go down paths that maybe we even knew we shouldn't, or we questioned whether we should. I just believe that is a part of the journey in the learning. So let's forgive ourselves. Let's be kinder with ourselves. Let's be grateful for some of the things that we have done for ourselves or for other people. And that can change our whole perspective just by taking those few moments a day. And that's what we're just challenging people when we see that difference between self-care and self-kindness, is that that might just open the door, if we're going to be a little kinder to ourselves, to say it is okay to relax. It is okay to say, I've got to create a few boundaries here because I need to know that I'm going to still be mentally healthy as we move forward in this.
And then watching that self-talk.
Mhm.
How often are we judging ourselves? How often are we beating ourselves up because of how we're speaking or what we're doing? And how often are we criticizing ourselves? And that's a bit about that self-kindness as well, because I think those things just roll through our minds and they can so easily derail us and put us back. And then I think our emotional wellness is really affected just by that self-talk.
And I think it's good to challenge ourselves on that because, yeah,
Hmm.
it's easy for us to say, oh, that you're so dumb. Why would you do that? But you say that too often, and that does change your belief. Then you do begin to believe that maybe I am kind of dumb. Like, really,
Hmm.
why did I think that that was okay? So just changing that narrative a little bit when I talk about forgiveness, but also just changing the wording around it that, oh my goodness, I made a mistake. That's a little bit different than saying, geez, you're so stupid. Why did you keep making that same mistake? It's just changing your mindset a little bit about that, bringing in the forgiveness, being okay with we're going to make mistakes. That's a part of
Hmm.
life. It's going to challenge us on a multitude of levels, but let's just be a little bit kinder.
And then really noticing when we do change our mindsets. And so maybe your pattern was saying you're dumb or you're, whatever. And then you're shifting your thinking, and all of a sudden you're realizing that you're congratulating yourself for things that you're doing
Mhm.
well. And that's success. And we have to notice those things, and then we can further that even more. And I think that's really important.
I think what's interesting about that, that almost challenges that belief about what is humility? What is being
Hmm.
humble? It's you're still being humble and using your sense of humility when you congratulate yourself as well. It's not being
Hmm.
boastful. There's a difference about maybe over exaggerating what you did or not. That's a little bit different. What we're just saying is you can still be humble, but you can still be happy and proud about what you just accomplished. What, even if it was just for the day of, hey, it's great. I got my floors done today, or I went for a walk. Yay, that's
Hmm.
great. So there is still some humility to that. So not to get that confused either, because I think that's kind of out there in the world too, that we shouldn't be boastful. We shouldn't be saying how good we are at things. But it is okay every once in a while to acknowledge that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I think for myself, if what has happened in the past, if I had been down or second guessing myself. So if I'm teaching yoga and I came out of that class thinking about, oh, I said this, or I didn't do this, or I forgot to add this, and oh my goodness. And then I get in a bit of a little vortex of negativity. But to come out of a yoga class and congratulate myself for what I did well, it's changing and shifting that thinking. So then the next class, I can work from that place of those things I did well, and then move on to even, creating better classes for myself. And then I start to enjoy them more as well, because I'm not always having that negative talk, and I'm not always berating myself for the mistakes that I've made.
Absolutely. And it's
So,
very tough to build
mhm,
confidence, right? When we're the
mhm,
one taking ourselves down about things.
exactly. And I think that happens more often than not, that it's our own selves taking us down, for sure.
Mhm. Mhm,
So
definitely.
let's move on, and we'll talk a little bit about the hard, cold facts about mental health challenges.
I think we just wanted to highlight this a little bit to put some perspective in this. The reason why we're having so many conversations around it is because there is this other side. Certainly, we can just talk about individually what it is when we strengthen our emotional health and well being. But this is um, also happening within our industries. I look at all the different um, webcasts that we have been doing and highlighting each one of these areas, and often the stats in it are forgotten. We are talking just in the workplace alone, the cost of productivity, because sometimes we have to talk to the money makers as well and the corporations to be able to see the cost to them. So, in looking at the cost and the staggering cost of $6 billion lost in productivity, well, in a world right now, when we're talking about an inflationary world and we're hearing all these really negative things, we got to talk to the people that they're going to understand when you're talking money. And that's just due to being absent from work, or what we like to call presenteeism, which is just being present and being able to do your work because you're good in a good, solid way that you can complete your tasks at work. So that's in my world anyway, $6 billion is a lot of money. But I don't also want to just, it's not just money. We're talking people. And when we're talking 500,000 employed Canadians being off on mental illness and mental health challenges, that's a lot of people in a week.
That
We're
is a
talking,
lot of people.
that's bigger than Red Deer. So just putting perspective, that's saying everybody in Red Deer is at home and not able to go into work.
Hmm.
People need to see it in a more concrete fashion. And unfortunately, this is leading down to this 4,000 people that may not make it and may take their lives. We need some work to be done.
Yeah,
In
that's a pretty
my mind,
staggering number.
it is. It is. And this
Hmm.
is all ages as well. And I think that in the next three stats, I just wanted to make that point as well, that when we talk 4,000 people, we're not just talking about a little segment of certain people that this is happening to. We are noticing now that 70% of the mental health challenges begin in childhood. And this really speaks to the work that Paula and I have done across our lives in supporting families, people with complex needs. That is because often this is missed. It's missed that
Hmm.
these are mental health challenges, and there still could be other diagnoses there as well. But we got to talk about the mental health pieces too. Can't just get focused on a diagnosis on one end of things, because no different than the rest of our wheel, for everyone else with those complex needs, it is also impacting them fully as well. But that is a large number as well. So we got to support our kiddos if we want them to be able to be functioning, happy, healthy people within a community. That doesn't mean just because you do have a diagnosis, you can't. And I think Ariel said that quite nicely for us too, that no different that if you sat in a wheelchair, and I know we're still on that journey to try to have people understand that just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you can't do the job equal to a person that is not. You just might have to do some modifications, just like a person that is an able-bodied person walking in. We need to do often some modifications for them to be present at work, to be able to be effective at work, efficient at work. Same thing when we talk about a diagnosis around a mental health illness. Same thing. We just need some modifications. Let's support people so they can feel like they're contributing members of our communities as well. And then sadly, when we look to our seniors, what they've noticed as they've moved into the long-term setting is that they're seeing 2 out of 5 are being diagnosed with depression or symptoms of depression. And that really makes me sad that these people have worked to build our country, our communities, and that this is where they're landing. So these are often people that have never had that diagnosis before. So what are we missing when we talk about some of those gaps to support our seniors so that when we talk about those happy retirement years, they can actually enjoy them and feel productive, still feel a part and a member of our communities, and not have to feel as though they've been forgotten within their new setting. And then, of course, we just had finished with our agriculture or farm families. And the reason I wanted to put this, because often we just forget that our farm families are just as susceptible to the same type of stressors, and sometimes more, because, in our conversation that we had with John, he noted that for us too, the level of stress when it comes to finances for a farm family is extraordinary. And then the other level of stress is that unpredictability.
Oh, yeah. That was a huge piece of what he talked about.
Yes, absolutely. And the weather in the last few days, in the last few months, has that not just showing us how unpredictable it can be. One moment we're looking at a beautiful sunny day, to the next moment people can't even see to drive down the road. And for farmers, that can make the difference in a seeding time, that all of a sudden, we're thinking, oh, all the farmers, all they wanted to do is rain. Well, they don't while they're trying to seed.
Or what that one freak hailstorm in a summer and what damage it can do. And
Yes.
they're at the mercy of the weather.
Yes. And I can't imagine when you are looking at your entire livelihood, and you're right, in that one hailstorm could change
Mhm.
everything. But then the
Absolutely.
cost of it's almost like being on a stock market all the time, of deciding what you're going to invest in. Should you invest in insurances for hail and things like that? Is
Mhm.
it going to be a hail kind of year or not? Like, how do you predict
Right.
those kind of things?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so important that we need to be aware of that in our rural areas of our
Mhm.
farming families and be ready to support them.
And know that when we talk a farming family, the whole family is typically invested in
Yeah.
the occupation. So unlike, some of us now that are living in town, we go off to our jobs that is separate maybe from our families. So sometimes that can give us a little bit more sense of security. Well, at least, my partner has a job. So, this didn't work out well for me. At least there was somebody there to support the financial end. In our farming communities, often it's the whole family involved in that occupation, so they can be impacted equally along that
Mhm.
continuum.
Great information. And we'll talk a little bit more at the end about supports and resources as well for anyone who's in a circumstance where they're needing a little bit extra help along
Mhm.
the way.
Definitely.
So, an emotionally well person likes and accepts who they are. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier with that self talk and with that appreciation for who we are and changing the narrative and all that. But also, it's treating other people well and being thankful and appreciative for who's in our lives and for all that is in our lives as well. And part of being emotionally well is finding meaning in our lives.
I think because we had, when Paula, you brought up that continuum piece, it's just
Mhm.
acknowledging not every day everybody's feeling happy, hopeful, awesome, come up with all kinds of descriptive words. It's knowing that that continuum does go back and forth. But if we can build up the basis of essentially feeling still underneath it when we're challenged, we're still confident in ourselves. We believe in the possibility of future. We believe that we've been contributing to a greater good. All of those kind of things do make the difference in those feelings when it's a more trying time.
Yeah, because it's unrealistic to say that if you're a positive thinker, your life is just going to be perfect and go smoothly and all of that, right?
Yes.
And so it's not possible. Positive thinking can bring us out of some of those challenging times, but you're right, Shannon. I think thinking of our wellness on a continuum in general is important because there's going to be ups and downs. And I think what we're here to talk about is what about those off times? How do you pick yourself up when there's failure, loss, rejection, hardship? It they're just it's inescapable. We're always going to have those. So we need to try to figure out how to maintain our emotional wellness as well as our other areas of wellness to be able to be resilient during these times.
And I think when we brought up Brene Brown, when we were talking with Ariel the other day, that piece about empathy. And when we think of empathy, we often think about it for empathy for somebody else, truly
Mhm.
understanding the space that they're in, something that has happened. But sometimes we need that empathy for ourselves, because I think what can happen in a little bit of a spiral way, and I know I've done it to myself in the past, because I find myself telling myself, well, at least you have this. Well, at
Mhm.
least you're still working. Well, at least you have this. And it actually doesn't make me feel any better. It
No,
it just
sometimes it makes you feel
aggravates
worse
me.
for feeling down, right?
Yes.
Oh.
I can feel I'm angry with myself. So I can totally understand when, we're talking to somebody else, trying to be empathetic with them, and we're saying all of those things. It's the same thing coming back at us. If we're going to do the same thing with ourselves, we're going to still feel that same is not bringing us up anymore. It is really just piling on.
Mhm. So I think that uh, what you're saying is talking about our current circumstance and not at least you have this, leasting ourselves out of it. Just acknowledge where you're at. Ariel did talk about feeling your feelings, which I think some of us have a hard time, especially it depends on how you've grown up. If that
Mhm.
was a part of, if that was okay to do,
Mm.
so feeling your feelings, identify what you do and don't have control over, and then take steps to work with what you have control over and use those things to be able to support the areas where it's out of your control, like the weather, or like maybe something that's happening in your workplace that you don't have control over. Well, then find areas that you can control and use that, maybe thinking differently, maybe looking outside of the box of control. Because if I'm in my workplace and something's going on, maybe it's not reasonable to look for control in an in that workplace. Maybe I need to look outside of that workplace, if that makes sense, and maybe I need to take control of things if my physical wellness is an area that I can control and I'm having stress in my workplace and it's causing me emotional distress. Well, maybe in the area of physical wellness, I can control how I'm sleeping, what I'm putting into my body, how I'm moving my body, and maybe that will help me cope in other areas. But sometimes it is, Shannon and I talk about being intentional and having purpose for things. And so that would be really looking for areas and being purposeful about having control in certain things.
I think we often challenge people to talk about the personal responsibility piece,
Hmm.
because I think that if you can answer those questions for yourself, like what is your role? What was your role in that situation? Then that does speak to some of the things that no, you actually didn't have control. You didn't say mean things to
Yeah.
somebody. You didn't intentionally do something to harm someone. All of those things allow us to answer something in a more concrete way, that sometimes life happens, accidents happen. Did you intentionally want to hurt somebody? You can answer those things for yourself or hurt yourself. Sometimes we just land in situations as well. And then we try to be the best version of ourselves. Maybe we take the responsibility of what our piece was. It like, hey, I'm sorry. I was just feeling anxious, or upset or I was frustrated, I should not have said those things to you. That's taking personal responsibility for maybe not the situation of what that person did, but it was your role in it, that maybe you could have managed it a little bit better. But it does take a weight off of us, that if we're kind of holding on to that, geez, I said some really mean things because I was really upset the other day. And but you're
Mhm.
holding on to that, that impacts our stress level as well.
Oh, it does. It's almost like carrying something on your shoulders. And
Mm,
by acknowledging that, it lets us off the hook for some
mm,
of those kind of things that we're holding on to. Another way to have control over your situation is taking a look at short term and long term goals and reevaluating them, re-examining them, decide whether they make sense for you. Are they realistic? Can you actually achieve something that you've set out to achieve in the 1 week that you think you should be able to achieve it? Or does it make sense to do it over a few months?
I think,
And
sorry.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to throw in there about, that life coaching piece where we help people
Mhm,
look at their life script. And that is usually about a year long as well. And what I like about that, it does set some goals for us.
mhm,
It also gives us some steps to get to those goals to make sure it's not, completely unrealistic. I'm going to fly off and be an astronaut with Jeff Bezos next week. Nope, not going to happen. Probably not going to get me on a spaceship anyways, just as not a long-term goal. But regardless, it gives us a chance to look at that, but then also teaches us how to be flexible. Because, like we talk about farm families with some unpredictable pieces, even in everybody's lives, things can happen that we couldn't predict. But if you have that end game goal, you want to get there, you'll be taught a little bit of flexibility, that path isn't straight. Sometimes there's some bends along it. That doesn't mean you can't get to that goal. It just maybe it needs a few more months, maybe like ourselves, maybe we just needed one more course in order to
mhm,
get there, to feel more confident to do it. Maybe we didn't actually need the course, but it helped us to feel confident to make that next step. It's okay to make those adjustments along the way. Goals are just keep us and give us a little bit of focus so that we're just not scrambling, that 1 minute we're over here and we're going to be a runner, to the next minute that we're never going to run again, we're going to be over here. It's okay to evaluate those, but setting up something that is going to make you feel successful, because there's nothing
mhm.
better when you actually do achieve something.
Right. And then brainstorming. So kind of what we're doing now, but specifically around when you're having challenges is a great thing to do. Brainstorming, taking a look at things, planning, looking at other perspectives, and then seeking help and support from family, friends, and of course, healthcare professionals. And again, we'll talk about this a bit more later and give you some tangible resources to help you with that. But that's something that we say all the time. Do not hesitate to seek out support.
That's why it becomes so important to build up those trusting relationships, those
Yes.
social connections that you can trust. Different people bring different things to us, even in a social capacity as well. But it's so important to find people that maybe you can have that really good conversation with, and you can trust the fact that that information isn't going everywhere and anywhere. Because sometimes, like we had talked about earlier, just being able to say something, get it off of, our mind or whatever it is, really helps us to be able to then see it in a more realistic way.
Exactly. So connecting to your emotional wellness, sometimes you need to be able to connect. You also need to be reflective. You
Mhm.
need to give yourself the space and time to be able to really process and take a look at things. And we talk a lot about journaling, and maybe that's not for everyone, but maybe you're thinking about it in a traditional sense, sitting down with your book, opening up, but maybe it is just sitting and thinking about things in a time frame that you've set aside, where you're actually going to ask yourself some questions and think about it. Maybe it's using notes on your phone to journal. Or Shannon talks about a lot about giving yourself space and journaling in unconventional ways, like through painting or doing crafts, just giving your mind a chance to just kind of settle and be. And then you're able to kind of make sense about things that you're challenged with or stressed about.
I think even if you look at something like a day planner, Making
Yeah.
notes in a day planner actually gives you some concrete information, having just gone through it to see how many podcasts and how many webcasts and things like that we've done, put perspective for me that I had
Mhm.
forgotten. I've forgotten with all of the people that we had connected with, even outside of those webcasts and podcasts, but it puts perspective. And that's the idea of journaling, is just an area to put perspective or to put our thoughts in another way that we don't have to feel like we have to carry them all the time.
Mhm. And then it gives you an idea of, do I have healthy and effective strategies to be able to manage the stressors in my life? Sometimes just the act of looking at things and sorting through them is enough to be
Mhm.
able to kind of, like you said, put things in perspective. But then you're going to know, do I need to take another step? Do I need to talk to someone to really get things under control and manage how I'm feeling?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to those kind of trusted relationships, but also
Yeah.
understanding that even though it's a trusted relationship, doesn't mean they're the person that can actually help you through it. Maybe they're the person that says, "Hey, this doesn't seem like you." Might be a time to reach out to somebody who could be completely objective about this, help you
Mhm.
work through that because like I'm just the friend that can listen.
Yeah,
And I think that's okay to say too.
I think so. And sometimes if it's okay to just be that friend and just hold space for that person and just listen and allow them to do what they need to do to kind of work through things in their own mind, and they just need to be able to bounce ideas off someone. And I think also when we're talking about things, when we're looking at things, when we're writing things down, it also helps us make decisions about next steps and decisions about what's going on in our lives. And that's important because decisions can be making a decision can be a source of stress for many people. And then they just push things aside and they don't make a decision until they absolutely have to, which can also be very stressful because you haven't actually really decided if it's the right decision for you or not. And so being able to identify priorities and obligations, really taking a look at, does it work with your family, your work, your friends, your leisure time, all of that is important when you're making decisions. So being able to talk to someone or write it down, journal about it, put your commitments in your day timer, very important.
Well, and it brings back the point of feeling overwhelmed. When
Mhm.
you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're not putting it down on paper or something like that, no matter what your version of that looks like, it is really hard to actually begin to see things because it's all over your brain then. You
Mhm.
can't even see that time and space that's available for you to be able to work through it when you're feeling overwhelmed. So it is a great kind of place to begin is not jotting things down, coming up with a little bit of a plan, whatever that looks like for you, because then your overwhelmed brain doesn't also have to deal with all the details of it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to think about it. So we talk a little bit about a backpack, and I actually have my backpack ready here today. And so this is we talk about unpacking our backpack and what we carry around in our backpack with us all the time. And so the backpack is such a great metaphor for what we carry on our shoulders and what we can do about it. So in our backpack, all of us have experiences. And that's just every life experience that happens to us. Sometimes we still carry all those around with us. We might have stress, anxiety. Oh, this one's heavy in my backpack here today. Sadness, worry, more experiences. Maybe these ones were happy experiences. Maybe the other ones were challenging experiences. Oh, more experiences. So maybe these ones were um, stressful experiences. Look at all the experiences that make up what's in our backpack. It's just amazing now that I've taken all those things out of my backpack, how different it feels. And so, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about unpacking our backpack. It's actually taking a look at what we're carrying, what's weighing us down, and what can we do to let go of some of that stuff. And I think that's what we're talking about when we're mentioning talking about someone or talking with someone about these things, because they help us sort through them. So maybe in some of our experiences, maybe we don't need to be carrying them in our backpacks anymore. When we first used this tool, we were working with some young athletes, and I was telling them in my backpack that there was something that I needed to let go of. And it was, I had to rehome a puppy. And I was carrying that with me, and it was just weighing me down, the guilt of having to rehome the dog, the sadness because I missed the dog, but it wasn't my dog, and I couldn't keep her anymore because I already have two of my own. Um, and I just was carrying this heaviness, but it was something that I was able to let go of because I realized that the dog was living its best life because it went to a home with uh, a woman that was able to stay at home all day with the dog. And the husband was just wanting this companion to take around when he was off work, take around everywhere. And so they were just so grateful and so happy to have this dog in their life. So that was something that was weighing me down, but it was something that I could look at and decide that I was going to let go of, just to lighten that load a little bit. And it doesn't sound like that's something that's really a serious thing to be carrying around in my backpack. But once I consciously let go of, I realized how heavy and how much I was holding on to that. And so that's the piece that we talk about: reflection. Take a look at all those things in your backpack, reflect on them, decide what you need to deal with, what's okay to have in our backpack. Some of those good experiences are wonderful. If, last summer I went kayaking in the mountains, and those experiences were just wonderful. It was peaceful and happy. The water was blue. That's okay to keep that experience with me because it can uplift me when I'm feeling down. But some of the anxiety, some of the worries, maybe we can reflect on those and decide what we need to let go of, and then look at what we need to use as coping tools. What can help us deal with those? And then talk it out, like we've been saying, talk it out with someone that you trust, talk it out with a professional, and then actually take action to be able to get rid of that. And it might sound like it's simple to get rid of it, but it has to be purposeful, it has to be intentional. You have to consciously want to unload some of this stuff.
I think probably what holds us back sometimes is, like you said, that even just giving away the puppy was connected to so many other things,
Yeah,
right? It wasn't just
absolutely.
about a dog that you happened to find. It was deeper than that. So that's
Mm,
kind of what can make it difficult when we've got to make some choices. But that reflection is a chance to kind of evaluate the things and the actual information around it. And when we say about it, probably was feeling fairly overwhelming to have to do because it was connected to all of these other things. But by working through it, whether that been through journaling, obviously talking to some other people, had you not done that, you did never found this family that was so wanting, and the
mhm.
kind of the perfect location where we can't even fathom that if that information, we can't even collect the information. So that's what it becomes so important to take the time. Like you said, some experiences we're going to save because there were some times of our life where it gives us the experience to, we do lots of kayaking. We've learned how to kayak down the river. We're keeping those
Mhm.
experiences. So the next time I go, I know I got to bring lots of tea with me and lots of water
Exactly.
and lots
Lots
of
of
snacks,
sunscreen.
lots of
Yep,
sunscreen,
all of
right?
that.
Those are the things that remind us that, oh, I can make this experience even better because now I'm going to have my snacks. Now I'm not going to
Mhm.
get burnt up because I'm going to have my sunscreen. So
Yeah.
those are good things to
And
carry.
those provided some of the coping tools, right? By keeping
Yes.
some of those things in, right? That's lending to our coping skills. But you're so right, Shannon. And even as I was talking, because of this, the dog was attached to another situation that caused me a lot of pain and grief. Even as I was telling the story, I wasn't connecting all those dots to it. But you're right. That was a situation that did require more than just giving away a dog. And
Mhm.
so by reflecting on it, we have to really look at the whole picture and access the support to be able to really unpack that and take the action.
Mhm. And you also wanted to keep stepping it back into, you also took the personal responsibility to know what your role was in that, could be in that. Why were you thinking you needed to keep the dog? It wasn't out of a negative. You didn't want anyone else in this world to ever have this very special
Right.
dog. No. And you can only do that by taking in that personal pieces to it, that personal
Mhm.
responsibility of one, were you capable? Was that fair to the rest of your family, the lifestyle, even your other dogs, all the things that we are actually rolling around in our brain and putting it out there, maybe not to the world, but in your own being able to reflect, whether that's through the journal or allowing that time and space to think about it, and then calling upon those coping tools to say, hey, one thing that works well for me is I just got to jot this all down to figure out where's reality in this situation. Sometimes we look at those things in financial situations. It seems so overwhelming. We can't even think about it. Something we have to pay is going to be really expensive. We can't get through it. Now we're super stressed and we're holding and carrying that with us. And it's just weighing heavier and heavier. But when we just take a few steps about, okay, let me just jot this down. What does this actually mean? That's a
Mhm.
coping tool that can lighten the load just a little bit. Doesn't mean we could solve all problems with it. And maybe it means, hey, this is a financial thing beyond my understanding. I got to connect with an accountant, or I need to connect with a bank, or I need to connect with a financial person that could actually explain it to me that it's okay. I don't understand all of those pieces. So
Yeah.
those are just some of the tools, and the talking it out is saying it's okay to talk things out. It's okay.
Yeah, because one experience, like just the example we're using about the dog, that one experience, then it also poured into my backpack, stress, anxiety, worry, sadness, all of it, right? So by looking at that experience and um, accessing some tools and then taking action, it was able to alleviate some of the other things that were filling up my backpack surrounding that one experience. So yeah, we
It
really
helps us,
do
I
like.
think. Sorry, I was just going to say sometimes it helps us get to the root as well.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of what I was going to say. That's why we
Yeah.
really like the backpack analogy,
Yes.
because it just really allows us to take a really good look at what we carry with us and what we need to do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is why, it's been a bit of a passion of ours, a part of the project is to really build not only the community connection and building capacity for people, but also finding that concrete tool that
Yeah.
people could just look up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Nobody's taking your information, holding that anywhere. So we created this mental health and well-being resource hub for that very point, was to create community connection, that there would be resources in your area. Some aren't locally here, but that's okay too, because different people and different resources work different for everybody. So we wanted
Hmm.
to make sure there was a broad range of people. But most importantly, for as many people that we could, we wanted to put a face to a name, because I think that breaks down some barriers and walls for people, because at least when we know what somebody looks like, we feel like we've already got that initial connection. We know who we're about to talk to. And then we
Reduces some
can,
of the fear around it for
oh,
sure.
absolutely. It is stressful, even when we want something and it's a positive situation. When we just pick up the phone, we have to call somebody, it's a little stressful, even in
Well,
that.
and also, something sometimes, or some things we don't talk about all the time, is that anyone can access support. It's okay, even if you think that your problem isn't um, big enough
Yes, isn't that the
to
truth?
access support. And I think sometimes that holds us back. But if
Yes,
it's a problem for you, it's a problem.
yes.
And we are all, it's available to all of us to be able to access these resources.
Yeah, so if you have the opportunity, go on the website at sagewellnessconnection.com. It'll be under the Mental Health and Wellbeing Resource Hub. And then we've broken it down into those 8 domains, so that, if you want to look through them all and see what suits you, or you have a specific area you want to start with, that's why we broke it up that way, is just to begin that understanding that maybe these resources appear that they're specifically for finances or specifically for emotional health and well-being. They usually interconnect, and we talk lots about that. They're all interconnected, but maybe that person, even if it's your financial person, is that initial link, and that's what sends you to get the next level of support. That's what we're after here.
And if you have any suggestions, anyone that you'd like to highlight for us to highlight on our mental health and wellbeing resource hub, please send us an email or connect to us through the website. Or if you yourself have a service or support that you'd like to offer, by all means, please connect with us as well. So thank you so much.
Before we go, is on that resource hub, that once the information is up, it will be a direct link to the website and the information to be able to connect. I forgot to say that earlier.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
So thanks everyone for being with us today, and we hope to connect with you soon.
Yes, thank you.